How's it going? Thanks for coming today.
Hello. It seems to have some camera issues over here.
Yeah.
I know.
We can't see you.
I know.
Mm-hmm. True. Hey again. You there?
I'm there, but it says
Hi.
my camera is not connected. So I don't know.
Well, it's up to you if you want to try again or if you accept being
Yeah,
a
let me just
small circle.
let me leave. I can be a circle, but let me leave and come back.
Okay. One more try. Sorry. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Yeah. I don't want us to say anything interesting or important without Laritz, but so I'll just tell you that watching the Dells this time made me think a lot about this place called the Magic Forest that I used to go to as a child
Oh, amazing.
in the Adirondacks.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It no longer exists, but there was a diving horse, and that jumping dog, the dog jumping over. I forget now what they call that. The
Stand Rock. is
Stand
like
Rock,
a
yeah, the
formation.
world famous Stand Rock.
Yeah.
The dog jumping from one side.
Wait, it was
to the other.
diving?
Well, I mean, it just fell off a platform into the water, but they call it a diving horse. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, made me think a lot about that.
Well, they used to have the tour guides do the jumping.
Oh,
And they
yeah.
changed it in the 80s, I think.
Did you ever experience that?
No.
Larit.
Yeah, hi. I can't figure it out. So
Yeah,
I'll
I
just
think-
be a circle.
yeah. That's okay.
Yeah, I've been having a lot of issues with cameras here lately. So that's okay.
Well,
Well,
welcome and thank you,
thank you.
for coming and joining us. And we have Nellie and Islo here. Can you see us okay on your?
I see you very well.
Okay,
Yeah, and thank you, Nelly and Islo. I guess you've been. Hi, Sarah. I guess you've been chatting a little bit. Um, I I wanted to start a little bit of a conversation around the question of kind of, you know, a thing I started thinking about when watching both of your films again was thinking about flows and frequencies. Of course, sonic frequencies, but also flows of uh, people and other beings. But also thinking a little bit about how we tune into flows. Um, at least artists might turn into flows and turn into certain frequencies. I guess this is a long-winded way of saying, could you talk a little bit about process and access, and how did you approach these films that are of course very different films, but in many ways, to me, deal with things in very poetic sensibilities that I find similar. So long story short, could you talk a little bit about process and access?
Yeah. Hi, Lawrence. It's nice to hear from you, at least. Thanks for the question. I would say in my case, for In Place of a Hollow Tree, you know, it kind of started with me moving into a 12th floor apartment, and you know, I'd only lived maybe on the second or third floor before, and so kind of getting acclimated to that space. And you know, one of the things being seeing the chimney swifts outside of my window and seeing them kind of circle around, and you know, not really thinking about it at first, and then slowly over the course of days taking notice of it, and you know, at the same time getting used to the acoustic ecology of that apartment, and especially in Chicago with you know, all the wind by the lake, just sort of like being surprised by how much I could hear the street still, but then felt like I was in kind of in a different environment altogether as well. So I think, you know, it sort of like was scraping past just the kind of like non-conscious everyday experience of that to really start thinking about it. And, you know, yeah, so I think it started from there, and then just researching the swifts more and kind of like understanding, as you said, the way that they're flowing or tuning into frequencies, you know, felt, I guess, similar to the experience of me, you know, even just becoming aware of them and of their flow and frequency, you know, as opposed to just starting out from a kind of like classical romantic perspective of like looking out the window and just like thinking about it in terms of like birdsong and flight pattern, right? And just like the ways that we can appreciate their beauty and going from there. So
yeah, it was cool to see these paired together. It worked really well. Yeah, in the case of making this film, you know, I knew that I wanted to make a film in Wisconsin Dells, and all the J1 international students sort of were the obvious choice for me for the sort of layer of the town to focus on, because I was just interested in their experience as being outsiders to this place and getting to know it. And I think in terms of like, I think a flow is a good way to kind of think about how I was getting to know the space. Like it has, or the town has these like rhythms of work. And, you know, I kind of gradually, I was there for the course of sort of, I guess, 4 summers, off and on. And it was sort of about, it was interesting because even when the students themselves as individuals left and were replaced, the rhythms kind of remained the same, more or less, because people work one job, then they work the second job. And so there was like kind of a lull in the middle of the day when people were kind of tired and wouldn't really want to hang out. Then I would kind of got to know the rhythm of when I could expect to find groups of people at McDonald's, like people partying and stuff like that. So yeah, the town and the rhythm and the work schedules really kind of dictate the social like rhythm that I was able to kind of get to know. And then of course I was getting to know individual people sort of in a sort of haphazard, like organic way. And then, we're meeting up and filming, and I'm basing my time off of that. But it was it was a very strange quality of time for me, because I was sort of like, I'm working on my film, but I don't have a job here. Everyone else has has 2 jobs. So I was kind of, and I wasn't really, I filmed with some people at work, but the big employers, the water parks and the resorts weren't interested in, I asked without pushing too hard, because I didn't really feel like they would have much reason to want me to be there. Plus I just was more interested in the social times and the off times. And then adding the taxi driver, Jason, was another way to add a kind of predictable rhythm to my time and my days, and kind of add another element of sort of like chance encounter into the filming. So it was a lot about just like setting up, a lot of it was kind of serendipitous, but it needed to be kind of set up for that, so that I could know where there might be people, when people would be not available, etc.
I really like this notion that you're talking about how the structure remains, right? So even as laborers, youth flow in and out, the structure remains. And I feel, to me, that there in both works, and maybe I'm projecting, and that's the beauty of it, right, is that there seems to be a slight allegory around sort of the imaginaries of space and the imaginaries of horizons, maybe frontiers, but also around borders and freedom of movement that seem to be to me, very poignant now within an American context, but also, of course, globally. That's more like a comment than a question, I guess. But I guess since you're on stage, I guess there is an opportunity to talk a little bit about, Nelly, talk a little bit about some of the more intricate problematics around the DELs and the J1 visas and the sort of dreams that they have that seem to be very much dreams.
Yeah. I mean, I think what drew me initially to the town, even before really getting into the weeds of meeting the students and finding out the details of their experience, was the kind of the elaborateness of the way that like a fantasy is being projected, or many like higgledy-piggledy kind of different fantasies are being like built into the space, and it like takes so much work to kind of keep those maintained, like the buildings, the rituals, like the kind of vacation vibe is all very labor intensive. So that was a big part of what drew me into it, and kind of seeing how that would work behind the scenes. But yeah, in terms of the problematics, I mean, I think there's the obvious, or maybe less obvious, but clear, like sort of labor exploitation that goes on. People are new and they're temporary. So it depends on your employer. Some people are being treated just fine and getting their due wages and so forth. But, there's like, you hear a lot about wage theft, and people are working like a lot of hours. I think even among all the students that I met, the main theme was sort of just like being worn out. Like their main takeaway from the US is like, people here work all the time, and like the taxi drivers are working all the time. And that's like the main thing. But then the other sort of like, I don't know, one thing that I kept finding so sort of like ironic and like in a sad way was that the whole town is set up as this sort of like international, expansive, like escape from the everyday. It's like, is it Greek? Is it Swiss? Is it Bavarian? Is it whatever? Ripley's Believe It or Not? Like, and then, and also the students function as this sort of novelty within the town. Like waitresses will be like, oh, we've got so-and-so here from Bulgaria and whatever. So it's like, it's part of the sort of identity of the town. But then of course, like, especially now, but even when I was making the film, you know, their rights are expendable, and they're sort of just kind of, yeah, they're not treated the same. So, I mean, I think it felt much, I think I would feel differently about the people that I met if like they weren't for the most part just going home again. Like the temporariness, I think also opened up a space for me to think about that stuff. And the way that these dreams were functioning for them in a way that felt like a little less like heartbreaking. You know, it's like, it's sort of a break from your real life, even if it's like a dream. So they're sort of on vacation as well. So yeah, I mean, and those, I was very struck by how much the myth of America as a place where you can make a lot of money and just have this like glamorous freedom was so pervasive among these young people who I was like, where are you guys getting this? What movies are you watching? They were all like, it's like my one friend who's in the film who also helped me as like an associate producer for part of it. He was like, when I got here, it was like just like Grand Theft Auto. Like I was like looking around and it was so cool. Everyone was just like drinking sodas and being like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah." So it's like video games, it's TV. It's just like, it's this, you know, it's been exported as this thing where like this core. And it was fascinating to see their responses. And I was surprised. I was like, you guys ever heard about the bad stuff in the US? But you know, how would they? They're like 18 to 20 something. Yeah, I forget the original question, but I feel like that's vaguely what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I guess I was thinking about this, for me at least, this sort of poetics of it, of both films, and thinking about how they feel like, yeah, poignant poems to our time in a way. And I wonder, Anslo, if you would talk a little bit about sort of your relationship to dealing with both abstraction and the concrete, because the migratory patterns are, I guess, quote unquote, kind of concrete through the Midwest. Yeah, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a big part of what feels abstract, I think, or at least for me in the film, is like thinking about the presence of infrasound and the idea that there's deep ocean waves that are coming up to the surface, vibrating the surface, creating infrasound that then the birds are using to kind of like orient, like almost like as a radar, you know, as opposed to visual cues that like the sun, the moon, the stars, we're all fairly familiar with that sort of like navigation that birds do, and other animals, of course. But yeah, so I think for me, you know, and that was what I was most interested as well. You know, especially being a sound-driven filmmaker, and you know, then the question was like, how can that be illustrated, you know, visually, you know, sonically, at the same time, and so I think, you know, on the one hand, that's a big aspect of abstraction to deal with. Just because we literally can't hear those frequencies, you know, like that's past our human hearing. But then I think, you know, at the same time, it's also like imagining what it's like in the chimney, you know, or even just like thinking about what it's like to maybe like fly across the world, think that you would stay in a hollow tree and end up in a chimney, you know. You know, maybe that's going a bit too far with projecting onto the birds and everything like that. But yeah, I think you know, for me it was about, yeah, how can that aspect of their navigation, the sort of like sonic radar, you know, how can we imagine things in a way that kind of like brings that into our sensory landscape, so to speak.
Laritz, we have a question in the audience. Is it okay to throw it over to them?
Kurt has muted me. Yes, it is great.
Okay.
Thank you, Anslo.
Well, I enjoyed both of your films. I thought the cinematography in the Swift one was really amazing. I really appreciated what you did with that. I would like both of you to say how many hours of film you actually put into these short films.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I feel like this is gonna pale like a lot in comparison to Nelly, because I think for me, I was so limited by the fact that the birds aren't here all the time, and maybe that's also true of the J1 students, but I think maybe like 10 hours, maybe, like it was like a few out the window and then going just finding the right chimneys basically. But I would say like when we're seeing the birds fly down into the chimney, like that all happens fairly quickly. So that is only a matter of like 5 or 10 minutes at sundown. So yeah, not that much, honestly.
This wasn't actually as much as you might expect. It was like, I think it was like 80 to 90 hours or something. I think I was like, I was always craving more like material, etc. because like we're there. And but it was really just speaking to like the keeping most of the time I had with students in the off hours. Like they just work all the time, and since I wasn't with them at work, they don't have that much time to hang out. So it was like it felt like a lot of the process was about hanging out, and then I would, it was also sort of like sometimes I would be filming, sometimes I would be hanging out because I'm also like driving people places, or we're just like talking, or so it was a little bit like a hard one, like 80 or 90 hours over kind of a long time.
Nelly, I have 2 quick questions. First, about some deep Dell's lore. Did you
Very
encounter a restaurant? I think it's called the Cheese Factory. It's a vegetarian restaurant that was owned by a cult, and it was investigated federally. Is that still a thing there?
No.
I found out about it in 2005.
Was
Anyway,
it like in Wisconsin or in the Dells?
it's in the Dells.
Yeah, that's not
proper.
there anymore.
Okay,
No.
yeah. Probably good. People were not even this is about people being exploited. People were not
Fully
being
in a
paid
cult.
there at all. Yeah. And then the second one, you kind of alluded to the fact that you didn't really have access to the attractions very much, but there was definitely like footage inside those places. So I'm curious about the process of like stealing footage or getting access, that kind of stuff.
I also just went there as like a tourist. I was just like went and like got a ticket to the water park and was like filming on my phone and stuff. I mean, it was kind of strange because so much of my time there was like also just sort of being a tourist there in a way, because like I would have time to kill, or like was just sort of in different phases of the process, or people would be busy or whatever, and I would just be like, okay, well, I'm gonna get another shot of like the boat tour because I don't really like the one that I have. So I like went on the boat tour a lot, and it was really helpful to just, I think it's a place that keeps like, it is really fascinating, like all the layers that are there, and I felt like there's so much that's not even the film that I kind of like, I know the layout really well, and so by the end with the sort of interstitial like shots of like the landscape and stuff like that, by the end, I felt much more confident about like, okay, I think I want to build it out like this, and I have the shots that I want. So a lot of it was just sort of like also like I'm researching, but I'm like going to a water park or something. Only for like a couple of days. I don't really like water parks. I think it's like disgusting. But I did go on the slides, and I would go do like, the students do they're also consumers of the place. They're tourists there, so on their downtime they like go to the water park or go to the mall or whatever, and so I just did all that stuff with them too.
Thanks so much for sharing both these films. I wanted to ask Nelly about the role of humor in the film. There are so many just very funny moments, whether it's like the surreal staging of these kitschy attractions and souvenirs, or just witty things the participants say. I mean, clearly got so many laughs from the audience, and I was wondering if these are things that were funny to you at the time, or something you maybe discovered in the edit, and if the presence of these like moments of levity shaped the overall form in any way.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I was like finding it so funny the whole time I was there. If anything, I think the film turned out a little bit more sort of serious and having more of a down note because of also I I mean, I think I was a little sadder about some of the like things that I was seeing like about the labor exploitation and stuff, because like the students are just like so young and they're like still kind of having a great time. Like I showed them the film and they're all like, oh, such a great summer. That's like miss it so much. And I was like, you're homeless and you're a fan. But that's also like a sort of, so anyway, so I was finding it funny. Yeah. But I do think, I mean, at one point I got kind of worried because I was telling a friend or like someone about the film and it's like, oh, very like Borat. Like, I was like, oh my God, no, it's not, like making fun of people's like accents and stuff. But the culture clash thing just seemed like it would have an inherent, like, it would be like an engine of, you know, for the film. And then also like, but I was getting stuff translated after the fact when people were speaking, like, especially in Turkish. I have no idea what they're saying. So I was like, when I was filming with that crew of the 3 guys specifically for long conversations and things, I was just like, guys, I'm going to get this translated. So I kind of had a second experience of like actually like that footage revealing itself to me later. And they were like also like talking to the translator and stuff, being like, don't use that part or like whatever. So it was that was a strange that was a strange like thing to overcome, but was like an interesting editing dynamic too.
Thank you both. I guess to the point of editing, I'm curious for both of you when in the process you started editing, sort of how soon after you started shooting, and sort of how did that then shape your sense of when you were done filming?
I shot the first bit of it like pretty actually chronologically, like May 2023, and then you know when the Swifts came back in September, like got the chimney shots and such, and then you know I was trying to work with, you know, it's only like 8 shots or something, but I was trying to work with it and edit, and it actually, like, I think the kind of like moment where we go into black and there's kind of like vertical wave, so to speak, I think that was the shot that was the kind of missing piece that took me a while to kind of like think of and how to do it and get it. And then I felt like once I got that, then it came together for me. But you know, yeah, it's quite a simple edit, and like most of the time was spent on sound design and getting the mix right and everything.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of editing. I started in 2019, and then I was, you know, editing a little bit, you know, making some samples and stuff like that. But I didn't really start editing in earnest until after I had done the first 3 summers when I had the bulk of the material, because I don't know. I mean, I was kind of glad that I didn't, because some people that I really liked or some material that I really liked ended up just being like completely replaced or eclipsed by other things that were more important. So I ended up just kind of, it took probably about a year and a bit of like proper, not full time because I was doing other things, but like being focused on that part of the process. And like I made like a lot of vignettes and scenes, and then was kind of, because I knew it would be kind of like mosaic structure like that. So I was sort of making those and then putting them together. I have a question, or something I was thinking about, I guess, in both. And Isel, you made me think of it too when you mentioned how maybe these birds are flying into a chimney thinking they're going into a hollow tree, but like the contrast between like these very man-made environments or parts of man-made environments like a chimney or like water slide structures and all that, sort of more constructed environments for us humans, and then you have this attention to the natural or to nature, like Jason telling folks how to read the movements of the deer and think about the weather, and like is it mulberries, I think, that he's pointing out. And so I'm just wondering about how that contrast entered the projects, or how we were thinking about that contrast maybe, or if you were, but it feels like it has presence in both projects.
Yeah, I think, like to some extent it's self-evident, right? Like, I'm just shooting out my window and there's a building and the birds flying, or, that's where to go, kind of see them fly down into the chimney is, to go to a chimney that they're inhabiting. And so it's almost like, it's hard to say that it's normalized, because that's such a like human process, but like I said, at first I didn't really think about it until learning more about the birds, and just even the idea that they would historically be roosting in hollow trees, but I think it's like I think about it, I guess, in terms of like an acoustic ecology, and that includes, of course, the built environment as much as the natural environment, and I think you feel it even more, I think, at that elevation, because especially in an urban setting, like hearing the way the sound reverberates, with the brick and all the different buildings, and so yeah, and just thinking about how things change, as we kind of like move upward in elevation, like thinking about, again, we think about the blue sky as just this like abstract, a kind of like romantic idea, but then it's like filled with all these radio waves and all sorts of other things, and so yeah, I think the project kind of made me think about those things in earnest more, like what is the kind of reality of those spaces beyond a kind of like simplistic everyday sort of notion of that.
Yeah, I mean, the original sort of like logic of Wisconsin Dells becoming like a tourist attraction is the like beautiful river and the rock formations and so forth. So like it felt very present to me when I was there, and just being there a lot, it becomes like very overwhelming and kind of tiring, because it's like just on that main drag and like everything is a fast food restaurant. It's like so loud and stuff. And I feel like, and also the social things that I was experiencing were like, there was a lot for me to think about and a lot of social like navigation and stuff. And so I feel like for me, like the nature was both something that was sort of a saving grace for the students I was meeting, like they were going on hikes, they were sort of like marveling at this strange and beautiful landscape. And then also for me, thinking about like the role of animals and like people talking about deer and birds, and just sort of tuning into that level was sort of helpful for me to not be like disillusioned, or to just kind of think like, okay, this is all going on. This is a layer that I'm thinking a lot about, but also there's other layers and there's other things going on here. And then I was sort of like, even the animals here have jobs. Like this dog has to work. They're talking about how the swallows like are like doing work. I was like, oh my God. So it's kind of fun after like a thing to just look forward to, but also felt like, yeah, just it's it's a very rural place in the middle of like everything around is farmland and stuff. Okay. Anything else, Lauritz, before we wrap it up here?
No, I think this is great. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Nelly and Einslow for their awesome films.
Thanks to Mimesis for having us. It was really
Thank you
great
so much.
to see this together. Yeah. Thanks, Lauritz.